so it's just after 7. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to tonight's webinar on the financial aid process. I am Lisa Bearfield. I'm the head of teen services here at the Wheaton Public Library. And our presenters tonight are Crystal Sanchez and Angela Brown from the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. If you have any questions during tonight's presentation, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. This presentation is being recorded and it will be sent out to all of you who signed up as well. It will be posted on our YouTube channel at a later date. That said, if anyone has any questions that get a little bit more personal in the Q&A, that have a little bit more of a personal answer, we can edit those out, so none of those will be in our recording. So feel free to ask anything that you need to. And then lastly, before we get started, I just wanted to share that we do have another college information presentation tomorrow night. It is called Applying to College, What's New in the College Search Process. And I will just post that in the chat if anyone is interested in registering for that as well. And with that, I will hand it over to Crystal and Angelo. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Sanchez. As mentioned earlier, I work for the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, or ISAC for short. I am an ISAC core member working in the College of DuPage District, which means I work with the families, students, and parents within the College of DuPage area. Also on the Zoom call is my district partner, Angelo Brown. He'll be moderating the chat and answering you guys' Q&A questions while I present. So what is ISAC? ISAC is the College Access and Financial Aid Agency in the state of Illinois that administers scholarships, grants, prepaid tuition, and student loan repayment forgiveness program. Our mission statement here at ISAC is to provide Illinois students with information and assistance to help make education beyond high school accessible and affordable. Now, there are so many things to think about when thinking about this college going process. For example, how much does college cost? Can I afford it? What is financial aid? And when and how do I apply? I know there's going to be a lot of questions that come to your mind during this presentation, but I do ask that you drop any questions you have in the Q&A. If you would like to speak with us more one-on-one, you can do so after the presentation, where we'd be more than happy to answer your questions. So we're going to go ahead and get started with talking about college and what is college. Typically, when we think of college, we're thinking of that 4-year bachelor's degree program, but that is not all college has to offer. College is any institution of higher education that awards a degree or credential post-high school graduation. This includes, but is not limited to, universities, colleges, and trade schools. First, we have vocational or trade programs, which typically take about 2 years, depending on how much time you have to dedicate to your studies and other aspects of your personal situation. And this can include programs such as cosmetology or mechanics. We also have an associate's degree, which can be completed at a community college. It takes about 2 years to complete. And again, this time could vary more or less depending on your personal situation. And of course, we have that typical, what we think of when we think of college, which is that 4-year bachelor's degree program that can be found at a public or private 4-year university or college, such as the University of Illinois or Urbana-Champaign, which is my alma mater. I have to give a quick plug, I promise. That's the last plug, hopefully. For tonight, I'm not going to be going into our master's degree program because that does not occur until after you finish a bachelor's. For tonight's presentation, I'm just going to focus on the first 3 types of degree programs. So you might be wondering, the whole topic of this presentation is financial aid. But what is financial aid? Financial aid is money from various sources to help you pay for college. It helps make college affordable and covers that gap between what you can afford to pay and that cost of college. And this money can be given, borrowed, or earned. We have 2 main types of financial aid. First, we have gift aid, which is money that is given to students based on a particular merit. For example, a grant is typically given to students who can showcase economic need, and scholarships are typically given to students based on a particular merit, such as if they are high academic merit, or if they are really talented in a sport. A lot of times they can apply for and get a scholarship to pay for college. And both these two types of aid do not need to be paid back. It is money given to you to pay for college. We also have self-help aid, which is borrowed or earned money. Borrowed money typically comes in the form of federal student loans. I will talk a little bit more about loans towards the end of this presentation. I do understand that this sometimes can cause people a little bit of anxiety when hearing this word, but I promise you I will try to explain it to the best of my abilities later on in this presentation. We also have the Federal Work-Study Program, which is essentially when you can get a federally funded job at a university or college you are attending, into which you will apply for and work a job at that college or university, for example, in a library. You do have to note that you do want to be a part of this work-study program when you do fill out your financial aid applications. And if you have any more questions about this Federal Work-Study Program or how it works, you can ask me after the presentation is over, and I'd be more than happy to get into a little bit more about that Federal Work-Study Program. We have four main sources of financial aid. First, we have the federal government, which is the U.S. Department of Education. We have the state government, which is us here at ISAC, or the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. Colleges and universities. Typically, colleges and universities will have grants and scholarships to give to the students who are attending their university. And we also have private sources of financial aid. For example, this can come in the form of a private bank loan, or it can come in the form of a private scholarship, such as a private scholarship from a college or for an organization near a college or a church, or it can come from really any community-based organizations can give scholarships to students to attend college. I personally was able to get about $500 for my local Rotary Club for all the community service I had done. So there's definitely a lot of money out there outside of the schools to help students pay for college. Now, the two must-know sources of financial aid are ISAC, which is us here at the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. We do offer grants, scholarships, prepaid tuition, and loan repayment forgiveness programs. We also have the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Federal Student Aid, which also offers similar programs. And these are the two main websites you want to know when you want to know anything that is financial aid related to the state or federal government. There are two big grants here in this process. We have the Illinois Monetary Award Program, which is a state, excuse me, one second. It is a state program in which you are able to get money to go to college if a student is able to demonstrate that they have economic need. They can win up to $8,400 in order to pay for college. This program just applies to students in Illinois who live in Illinois and are planning to attend a MAP-approved institution. And this funding comes on a first-come, first-served basis. So you always want to make sure to apply for financial aid as soon as possible. That way you can get as much money as possible from this MAP grant. We also have the federal Pell Grant, which can award up to $7,000 to a student who can also show that economic need. And this can be applied not just in the state of Illinois, but it can also be applied, say, at the University of Florida or the University of Kansas. You are able to apply this funding at other states, not just our state. If you are able to get that maximum amount of both of these programs, you can have up to $15,000 to pay for college. We here at ISAC also offer a couple grant programs. As I mentioned earlier, we have that MAP grant, which is that need-based grant that gives up to $8,400 to pay for college. We also have an Illinois Veterans Grant, an Illinois National Guard Grant, and a grant for dependents of police, fire, and correctional officers. If you believe any of these programs could apply to you or benefit you, I encourage you to please contact me after this presentation, and I'd be more than happy to give you more details about the last three grant programs. We also have teaching programs. We have the Minority Teachers of Illinois Scholarship, an Illinois Special Education Teacher Tuition Waiver, and an Early Childhood Access Consortium for Equity Scholarship. I'm not going to get too in-depth about these teaching programs just yet, but if you do have any questions about these programs or feel like you could benefit from these programs, I encourage you to ask me after this presentation. The one thing I will note, however, on this page is that each of these scholarships does have a certain teaching requirement in which a student should be 100% sure they want to enter the teaching field after they finish college. If they borrow this money and decide they are not going to be in the teaching field after college, they will have to pay this money back in the form of a loan. So if you are considering taking out the scholarship or waiver, please make sure that you or your student really does want to be a teacher after college, and they are sure that this is the path they want to take. There are also federal grant programs. We have the Pell Grant, as I mentioned earlier, that can give up to $7,000 to students who can demonstrate economic need. And this can be used for anything in the cost of attendance. Now I'll talk a little bit more of what that cost is in further slides. We also have the Iraq and Afghanistan Service Grant and the Teaching Grant. Once again, I'm not going to get super into depth on these last two grants, but if you do have any questions about these grants, you're more than welcome to ask me about them at the end of the presentation. And finally, we have some campus-based programs that can offer some financial aid. There is the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, which can offer $100,000 to $400,000 for anything in the cost of attendance. And this is for students with exceptional need. And we also have that Federal Work Study Program. As I mentioned earlier, the amounts that you earn for this Federal Work Study Program is predetermined by the college for anything in that cost of attendance. This funding is also on a first-come, first-served basis and can only be found at institutions that participate in these programs. So if you want to know more about how these programs look like at the campuses you're interested in, I encourage you to call the Office of Financial Aid at those campuses you are interested in order to find out more about how these programs look like at their institution. All right, so I'm going to take a quick second to take a water break and let you guys kind of process everything I've been saying before we get into that big portion of the loans. Okay, so should I consider student loans? The number one thing you want to remember when you're thinking about loans is to evaluate your options based on the following. What is the source of the loan? Where is your money coming from? Is it coming from the federal government, or is it coming from a private loan such as a bank? You also want to know your interest rate. Knowing your rate is really important, and whether it is variable, which means that it can change throughout the course of the loan, or if it's a fixed interest rate in which it stays the same throughout the entire life of that loan. You also want to think about the repayment and grace periods, in which when are you required to start paying back that money, and what repayment options do you have? And finally, you want to think about whether it's a subsidized or unsubsidized loan. Subsidized loans are generally more desirable, and I will go into just why in just a second. So what is the difference between these subsidized and unsubsidized loans? A direct subsidized loan is a need-based loan given to a student, and the interest of this loan is paid by the federal government while a student is at school at least half time, during grace periods, and during deferment. Versus an unsubsidized loan, which is not need-based, and a student is always responsible for paying the interest. The way I like to remember the difference between these two is thinking about the you, as in you are always responsible for paying the interest in an unsubsidized loan. So how much can you take out, and what is the interest rate? For a direct subsidized loan, again, this is a need-based loan that you can take out. The interest rate for this loan is 5.5%, and it is a fixed interest rate for the 2023-24 year. The grace period for this loan is a 6-month period, which is the same as the unsubsidized loan, which also has an interest rate of 5.5% and that grace period of 6 months. Now, for those of you who aren't sure what a grace period is, that is a time in which you separate from the institution where you do not have to repay those loans. And that separation can come in the form of graduation, it can come in the form of dropping out, or if you had to take a temporary leave from your studies, you would have a 6-month time after that separation from the university or college in which you will not be required to repay the loan. The main difference between the two during this grace period, the direct subsidized loan will not accrue any interest. It will still be paid by the federal government during that grace period. For an unsubsidized loan, the interest will still be accruing throughout that 6-month period, so you will have to pay back that interest after that 6-month period is over. We also have the Parent Plus loan, which is a credit-based loan that parents can take out for their students. This is an unsubsidized loan with a fixed interest rate of 8.05%. There is no grace period for this type of loan, and repayment starts within 60 days of taking out the loan. Now, how much can you get from this loan? For your first year as an undergraduate, a dependent student can get up to $5,500 to borrow to pay for college, with a maximum amount of this money being $3,500 in subsidized loans. This number increases each year. You do get to borrow about $1,000 more each year. For students who are independent, they can take out more money. And I believe if you feel like you are an independent student or feel like your situation does apply to being independent, you can speak to me after this presentation and I'd be more than happy to talk a little bit more about the independent student limits. All right, so now that we finished talking about that whole loans process, now we're gonna go into an overview of that financial aid process. The first thing you wanna do when you're beginning this process is to file a financial aid application every single year. You wanna make sure you can do this every year so that way you can continue receiving that financial assistance every single year. After that, you may need to complete a process called verification, in which you might need to provide additional documentation to the universities or colleges. But this is a very commonplace process, and if you are selected for this process, we here at ISAC are more than happy to help you through this process. Once you have completed your financial aid application and any verification, then you will receive and review financial aid offers from the colleges and universities, and to figure out which university or college would be the best financial fit for your student. Once you figure out which college or university you would like to attend, you want to make sure to respond to the colleges afterwards, saying if yes, you want to attend that institution, or no, you would not like to attend that institution. The most important part of saying no to a university or college that you don't want to go to is that you are letting them know you don't want to. So that way, if there is a student on a wait list, they can fulfill that spot that was previously held for you. And finally, you want to complete all pending processes after you finish your financial aid application. This can involve any sort of registration processes, orientation processes, housing applications, etc. So I'm going to take another quick break to get some water while you guys kind of process everything I've kind of been saying. Okay. So now you're probably wondering, how do I actually apply for all this kind of financial aid that I've been talking about? The main way you apply for this is using the free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA for short. You may also need to fill out the alternative application for Illinois financial aid if you are a student who is a qualifying undocumented student. You should be filling out one or the other of these applications. You should not be filling out both. Either you will fill out the FAFSA, and if you're ineligible to apply for the FAFSA, you can fill out the alternative application for Illinois financial aid if you are a qualifying undocumented student. And some colleges may also have some other forms that you will need to use to apply for financial aid as well. So let's dive in a little bit more about these two different forms. First, we have the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA. This is available at absolutely no cost to apply for. This is a completely free website. It is a completely free service here at ISAC to help you fill this out. If there is a website that is charging you money to fill out this form, or somebody who is charging you money to do this form, please, please, please do not give them money. Do not give them your personal information. It is likely a scam if a site is charging you money to fill out this form. So please remember, the first word in the FAFSA is free, which means this application should absolutely come at no cost. This application is used to apply for federal financial aid programs. Some states, such as our state here in Illinois, uses it to apply for state financial aid programs, like here in Illinois. And some colleges will use this to award institutional aid as well. And as mentioned, we also have the alternative application for Illinois financial aid, also known as the Alternative App. This application is available at absolutely no cost. So once again, if there is a site that is charging you money to fill out this form, please do not give them personal information or money. It is likely a scam. It is completely free, and us here at ISAC can help you fill out this form at no cost. This application is only for Illinois state financial aid for qualifying undocumented students. If you are eligible to fill out the FAFSA, fill out that FAFSA. If you are ineligible, but you are a qualifying documented student, you can fill out the alternative application. Once again, you should be filling out one or the other form, not both of them. Some colleges will also use the alternative application to award institutional aid. All right, so now we're going to get into who, what, where, when, and why in terms of this financial aid process. So who should be filling this out are high school seniors and college students. They should be filling out that FAFSA or the alternative application. The two websites are listed on your screen. These are the only two websites that have this form. If you are finding FAFSA.com or alternativeapp.org, that is not a legitimate website. They're likely scams. Please, it should only be these two sites. When should you fill this out? As soon as possible after the filing period begins. And you want to check with the colleges for specific deadlines. So for this year, for the 24-25 FAFSA, that is for students who plan to start college in fall 2024, the application will be released sometime in December. We are not exactly sure of which date. We do know that in December, that FAFSA will be released. As soon as possible after it is released, you want to go ahead and be filling that out. And as I said, you want to make sure you're checking with the colleges for specific deadlines. Some colleges may ask you to turn in your FAFSA sooner than others. For example, some colleges might have a deadline of March 1st to turn in that FAFSA, whereas other colleges might have a deadline of, let's say, May 1st. So you always want to be sure to check with the colleges for those specific deadlines and when you should be filling out that FAFSA, and always do it as soon as it comes out. Again, we here at ISAC can help you guys fill that out once it is released. Now, why should you fill out these applications? They are used to determine eligibility for federal state aid and even institutional aid in some cases. In other words, if you want to potentially get some free money to go to college, I highly encourage you to fill out these applications. It is important that you get some money to pay for college, and we want to help you guys along the way. Get as much aid as you can to pay for college to reduce that cost. So what information do I need to fill out these forms? For the FAFSA, the student will need a social security number. Parents who do not have a social can simply enter zeros into the field. You may also need your alien registration number if a student is not a U.S. citizen. And for both the FAFSA and the alternative application, you'll need federal tax returns, W-2s, and other records of income, banking statements, records of investments, records of untaxed income, and very important, a list of colleges students would like to attend. For that 24-25 FAFSA, they can list up to 20 colleges. When you are getting ready to fill out that form, you want to make sure your student has a list of the colleges they would like to attend, so that way the FAFSA knows where to send that financial aid report to, so that way the student can get that potential institutional aid. Big question many people ask is, do you need your parent information? The answer is yes. Most students must report their parent information until the age of 24, even if the student does not live with the parent. Now, there are some exceptions to this rule, and if you feel like your situation applies to that exception, we would be more than happy to help you out, figure out whether you would have to report that parent information or not. But in general, you will have to report that parent information, and only parents should be providing information on this application. Now, who is considered parents for the financial aid process is a biological, adoptive, or a step parent if they are married to a biological or adoptive parent. I do like to note that this is just the definition for financial aid. This does not have anything to do with your social emotional connection to a person. I know that for many students, their grandparents may feel like their parents, their aunts and uncles feel like parents. However, for this process, who is not considered a parent is a legal guardian, a foster parent, grandparent, sibling, aunt, uncle, friend, relative, or really anybody who claims the student on their taxes. If your parents are unmarried, if both your parents are living together, you should report that information for both of your parents, and this being the biological or adoptive parents. If your parents are divorced or separated, you should report the information about the parent who provides the most financial support for that student. Once again, I'm going to take a quick water break. So what sections do I need to complete? Students and parents must log in with their own Federal Student Aid FSA ID. This is essentially an account you create with the FAFSA that allows you to log in to access the form and finish off that form. Students should only be completing the student section. Parents should only be completing the parent section. Students will need to submit their parent's name, social, date of birth, and email to notify them to complete that parental section. I do want to add the email should be matching the parent's FSA ID to whatever email the parent used to create that FSA ID. That same email should be given to that student so that way they can invite their parent to contribute to their form. And the dependent students will not be able to see a submit until that parent section is complete. So the student will fill out their section, the parent will be filling out their section. Once both sections are complete, then that form can be turned in, but both sections must be done before that FAFSA can get turned in. So how are you going to report your tax information? Everyone must provide authorization for their tax information to be shared by the Internal Revenue Service, otherwise known as the IRS, with the FSA. If no authorization is provided, the student will not be eligible for federal aid until that authorization is given. And this does not apply to the alternative application. So for the FAFSA purposes, everyone must provide that authorization or that consent for their tax return info to be shared with the IRS. Or should be shared with the FAFSA by the IRS. Excuse me from that one. All right. So how do I sign my online application? For the FAFSA, as I mentioned earlier, a student must have an FSA ID and so does the parent. And these FSA IDs must be created and verified before starting a FAFSA. If you need any help with creating that FSA ID, feel free to contact myself, Angela, or any of our ISAC colleagues, and we'd be more than happy to help you create this ID if you do need some help with creating that FSA ID. For the alternative application, a student must have a personal identification number or a PIN number, and parents will also need to have a PIN number as well. Students and parents must each provide their own email address, and ISAC will send a PIN there. It is really important that parents and students are not sharing that email address when creating this account. They should be having their own email addresses added to that FAFSA or that alternative app, so you can each create your own account and each get your own PIN numbers for the alternative app. All right, so finally, after everything's done, you filled out the form, you finished it off, now what happens? A number will be generated by the FAFSA or alternative application known as the Student Aid Index. It reflects what the student can contribute to their education. This is what they can contribute. It does not necessarily mean that is what they will contribute. It is just giving that estimated number. This can be a negative number. And the reason why that Student Aid Index is important is because it is used to determine eligibility for most federal and state programs, and some colleges will use it for institutional aid eligibility as well. So let's take a look. What happens if I am selected for verification? I mentioned this a little bit earlier. The number one thing I want everyone to remember is you should not be alarmed by this process. This is completely commonplace process. It is used by many schools to confirm the data on your application is accurate. If you are selected for verification, you might be asked to submit some additional documentation. We ask that you guys provide only the information that is being requested. For example, if they're asking for your W-2, only submit that W-2. Don't go submitting that W-4 or any other documentation. The reason being, the more documents you add to submit, the longer it's going to take to process every single one of those documents. So you should only be providing the document they're requesting. Don't go adding any additional ones. That will only prolong the process even more. And you want to make sure to submit all the documents they are requesting for this process of verification on time. Once again, we don't want to have this process prolonged. We want to make sure you can get your student going and rolling. We don't want to have this prolonged. So submit all the documents on time and only provide the information or documentation they are requesting. Okay, I know that was a lot, so I'm going to take another quick water break before I go into the nitty-gritty of what is that college cost. Okay, so colleges create a budget to show the total cost for that school year. This is known as the cost of attendance, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation. This cost of attendance we typically call the sticker price because it is an estimated amount of money that it will cost to pay to go to that institution, but it does not mean that is what you are going to pay. This estimated cost of attendance comes from direct expenses, which are expenses paid directly to the institution, and indirect expenses, which are not always paid directly to the institution. For example, we have tuition and fees, which are always paid directly to the institution that you are attending. Then we have living expenses, such as food and housing. This can be direct or indirect. For example, I lived in a dorm all 4 years of my college career, so I was always paying the institution, I went to U of I, directly my housing cost as well as my food cost, since I did have a meal plan while I was living in the dorms. However, many students choose to get an apartment off campus or an on-campus sponsored apartment, and this might be an indirect cost in which you are paying a landlord or another organization for your living expenses, but you are not directly paying the university for living in an apartment off campus. You also have books, course materials, and equipment that is also an indirect cost. Sometimes you will have a bookstore at your campus where you can buy your books, but oftentimes students find that they can find cheaper options for buying books and course materials online and in other websites as well. So you will not always pay this directly. This is usually an indirect expense. There's also transportation. For example, if you are commuting to and from school every day, that is an indirect cost because you are not paying the cost to be transported to that institution. You are paying that on your own, any gas money or any kind of fixings you need for the car to transport yourself every single day. And lastly, we have miscellaneous expenses. This can be anything as far as personal care products, or, if you're like me and you have a little bit of a Starbucks problem and you're spending, like $5, $7, $10 each day on coffee, that would count as an indirect miscellaneous expense. That is not smart budgeting, people. I please encourage you, do not be spending $5 to $10 each day on Starbucks unless you can afford that. But overall, all these different fees make up that cost of attendance. Again, this is an estimated cost. It does not mean that is what you are going to need to pay to go to that college. Probably one of the most important questions we get is, how much financial aid can I receive? The amount of aid depends on your financial need. Colleges will consider all available aid to try and meet your financial need, but it is not guaranteed that they will meet it. How do they figure out how much you need? They're going to take that cost of attendance, or that cost of college, and subtract it from that student aid index we mentioned earlier, which reflects your financial resources, and subtract any other financial assistance you receive from that to create a total value of that financial need for what you need to pay for college. Let's take a look at some examples. For college A, it costs $25,000 to go to that college. The family in this example can contribute up to $3,000 to that education. They also receive about $10,000 in other financial assistance, so they have a financial need of $12,000 to pay for college A. Versus college B, which costs $34,000, you subtract that $3,000 that family can contribute, minus that $8,000 that comes from other sources of financial assistance, and you have that $23,000 financial need. I do want to add, just because a college seems more expensive does not mean you will pay more to attend that college. For example, if you are able to get $20,000 in financial assistance for college B, that would reduce that college financial need to about $3,000, versus for college A, if you only received, let's say, $5,000 to meet that need, you would be paying about $7,000. So you always want to keep in mind that potential aid you can receive, as well as that cost of attendance, to really look at what is the best financial fit for you. And the way you can find out what financial aid you'll be receiving for that institution is you'll be looking at your financial aid offers. Colleges will package all available aid into a financial aid offer that is typically sent in the form of a letter to your house or an email to students. You want to go ahead and review these offers to make sure you're making an informed decision. What is the best financial fit for you, your student, and your families? You want to keep in mind the following as you review these offers. What is your cost of attendance? What is your student aid index? What aid are you being eligible for? What types of aid do you have? And what is your out-of-pocket So starting to wrap things up, some couple tips and reminders that we have. You want to make sure to fill out that FAFSA or alternative application ASAP after that filing period begins. This year, that filing will begin sometime in December, and I encourage you guys to fill that out ASAP. Me and Angela are both here and available to help you out. Fill out that FAFSA once that comes out. You can also look into your local high schools and see if they are hosting any workshops to help you fill out this FAFSA or alternative app as well. Always remember this information is confidential and it is only used to determine eligibility for that financial aid. Supplemental application forms may be required by some institutions, so you always want to be keeping in mind and looking into what supplemental applications the institutions are requiring. You want to make sure you're keeping track of all the deadlines for all the forms you are filling out to attend these colleges. It is really important, not just for this financial aid process, but in general, in college, it is really important to keep track of your deadlines. I like getting planners or agendas to write all these deadlines down as a way of keeping organized. You also want to make sure to keep copies of everything you submit. With any federal form you fill out, it is always super important to keep copies of what you're submitting. In case there is some kind of error or anything, you have that documentation to help you out. And once again, please reapply for this every single year. If you want to continue receiving that financial assistance, you will have to reapply every single year for that FAFSA or alternative application, whichever one applies to you. Finally, we have the ISAC student portal. This is a really cool resource, which we have a lot of college planning, financial aid videos. This is also where you can find out more information about those grants and scholarship programs I mentioned earlier and even apply for them. We also have several tools and resources for students to help them through this college going process. So I highly recommend you guys check out this isac.org/student portal. It is an absolutely amazing site to help students through this process and parents as well. All right, everybody, if you can, take a screenshot of this page, take a picture with your phone. These are the trusted websites to use throughout this financial aid process. It has the most up-to-date information, and these are free, trusted sources of information. We have that student portal at ISAC, that studentaid.gov, which has all that kind of information in regards to federal student aid, the FAFSA.gov, and isac.org/alternative app. Once again, those last two websites should be the only places you are filling out that FAFSA or alternative application. If you are having websites like FAFSA.com or alternativeapp.org, please, those are probably scams. Do not fill those out. These are the two legitimate, trusted sources for those two forms. We'll give you guys a minute to take a picture of this or screenshot it. Finally, we do have our First Generation Scholars Network. This is for students who consider themselves first generation. You can join this network by clicking the Join Now button on our student portal page, or you can scan this QR code, which will lead you straight to that page. Joining this network allows students to connect with other first generation students to find a first gen program on the campus they are attending, and even join events specifically for first generation students. And our services are completely free, so I highly recommend if you are a first generation student, which means you are the first in your family to go to college or your parents have gotten an associate's degree or lower, you are considered first generation. We highly recommend that you join this network. It has really cool resources for first gen students. So go ahead and click on that link or type it in your search bar or scan that QR code to join our First Generation Scholars Network. That is all I have for today. My name is Crystal Sanchez. My email and phone number are listed on your screen. I do speak Spanish. If you do need some Spanish assistance in this process, I am more than happy to help. At this point, me and Angela will be more than happy to answer any questions you have. So feel free to unmute yourselves and we can go ahead and answer your questions. And we can also stop the recording at this point.